founding the first permanent English colonies, 1607 to 1630s. From 1607 through the 1630s, people from Europe sailed across a wide ocean to start new towns along North America's eastern coast. Some came for trade, some for land, and some to practice their faith in the way they wished. These first settlements, Jamestown, Plymouth, New Amsterdam, Boston, Maryland, Rhode Island, and Connecticut, began a long, complicated story. We will visit each place, see what people did, and listen to the words they wrote down for us to read today. Jamestown, 1607, a fort on the James. In 1607, the Virginia Company sent groups of men and boys to the Chesapeake Bay to try to start an English plantation. The river they sailed up was soon called the James. The newcomers stepped ashore on a marshy bend and began to work. They drove sharpened posts into the ground and built a small square fort of timber. Inside the palisade, they set stores and raised simple huts. Their plan, as the company had written, was to plant and inhabit in this new place. Work was hard, the land was unfamiliar, and the water near the shore tasted of salt. The sun and summer heat brought insects and disease the newcomers had not known at home. They tried to plant crops and to trade with the peoples who already lived nearby, but food was often short, and the work never ended. Jamestown was the first permanent English settlement in what would become the United States. Its beginning was hopeful. Men set stakes, cut wood, and lit fires. But that hope met hard weather and hard choices. The colony learned that staying alive here would require order, work, and sometimes help from neighbours. The starving time, 1609 to 1610. As Jamestown grew, it also faced severe danger. In the winter of 1609 to 1610, the settlement suffered what later writers called the starving time. Ships that were supposed to bring supplies were late or turned away. Food ran out and sickness spread through the fort. People raked for shellfish in the mud, searched for roots, and tried to make thin soups from whatever they could find. Faces grew thin and tired. Some left in despair, and some thought the colony would end. The few who kept working to mend the palisade and pull in food helped the settlement hang on until survivors and supplies finally arrived. The starving time taught a clear and bitter lesson. A colony needed careful planning, strong leadership, and steady work to survive in a new land. 1619. A House of Burgesses and the arrival of Africans. In 1619, Jamestown saw two major new steps. First, men met in a simple building to form the Virginia House of Burgesses. This assembly let settlers choose representatives to make local laws. It was the first time English colonists in America gathered in this way, and it began a long tradition of local self-government. At the same time, the colony's records record the arrival of Africans to Virginia. Some documents note the arrival of 20 and odd Africans brought to the colony that year. Over time, the institution of slavery would grow here and in other colonies. That change is part of a difficult history, one that shaped lives for many people and must be understood honestly. So 1619 shows both a new step towards self-rule and the start of systems that would cause great harm. The House of Burgesses was an important step for government. The arrival of Africans marked the beginning of a long, painful chapter in the colony's story. Plymouth Colony and the Mayflower Compact, 1620. In 1620, a small group of families known as the Pilgrims sailed across the Atlantic in the Mayflower. They landed on a cold, rocky shore in November and later moved to a sheltered spot where they built simple houses. William Bradford, who kept a journal, wrote a line we still read today, being thus arrived in a good harbour and brought safe to land. Life at Plymouth was hard in the first months. Many were sick from the voyage and winter was coming. The group realised they needed rules everyone would follow. So they wrote a short agreement now called the Mayflower Compact. It began with the solemn phrase, "In the name of God, Amen," and it set a plan. They would make laws together and obey them for the good of the colony. The compact helped the community work together in a small place where survival required cooperation. It was not a perfect cure for all problems, but it showed that people could agree on how to live together when they started a town far from home. New Netherland and New Amsterdam, 1626, Manhattan. While English settlements grew along the coasts, other Europeans came too. The Dutch West India Company set up trading posts in the early 1600s. On Manhattan Island, traders met Lenape people in calm exchanges of goods. A record from the Dutch colony later noted that Manhattan was purchased of the Indians for goods valued at 60 guilders. This line is often associated with a Dutch leader named Peter Minuit. New Amsterdam grew as a trading post where fur, food and tools moved across the quay. Ships, canoes, and many languages met there. A market formed, small warehouses rose, and the place became a lively port. In those days, New Amsterdam was not yet the great city New York would become, but it became an important point where different peoples met and traded. Massachusetts Bay Colony and Boston, 1630. In 1630, a large group of Puritans sailed to New England to build a colony where they could live according to their religious beliefs. John Winthrop was one of their leaders. In a sermon, he said the new colony should aim high. He used a phrase that people remember, "We shall be as a city upon a hill, the eyes of all people are upon us." That idea of setting an example helped shape the Puritans' work. They stepped ashore, cut timber, and raised a meeting house where the town would gather. They built schools and made town rules. Their life mixed faith, strict rules, and a lot of work. Neighbors watched each other closely. Community order mattered. Over time, Boston and other towns in Massachusetts Bay grew into a large region shaped by faith, law, and education. But the Puritans' strict ways also led to conflicts. Some people left to start new towns where they could live differently. Still, the colonies around Boston had major influence on how New England developed. Maryland settlement, 1634. In 1634, Lord Baltimore led a group of settlers to the Chesapeake Bay to found Maryland. The colony's charter described the plan to erect and establish a colony and plantation. One reason for Maryland's founding was to create a place where Catholics and others might find safer practice of their religion than they could in England at that time. Settlers built houses, planted tobacco fields, and traded with neighbours. The leaders hoped to make rules that would encourage settlement and keep order. Maryland's early years mixed hopes for religious toleration with plans to make money from crops like tobacco. Over time, the colony grew, and its history shows both the hopes of its founders and the complicated realities of colonial life. Rhode Island and Connecticut, 1636. By the mid-1630s, people in New England were moving and founding new towns when they disagreed with existing leaders. Roger Williams left Massachusetts and founded Rhode Island. Williams argued that government should not force people's religion and that settlers should treat native people fairly. Rhode Island became known for greater religious freedom. At about the same time, Thomas Hooker led a group from Massachusetts to the Connecticut River and helped found what became Connecticut. Towns in Connecticut developed rules for town government that let more people take part in choosing leaders. These new colonies showed that people took different ideas about faith, law, and government and tried them in new places. From Jamestown to Plymouth, from New Amsterdam to Boston, Maryland, Rhode Island, and Connecticut, these first settlements were small starts with long effects. Some came for profit, some for faith, some for refuge. They met native nations who had lived on the land for generations, and those meetings changed lives in many ways. The record we have includes primary words from leaders and writers who lived then. We have lines like Bradford's being thus arrived in a good harbour and brought safe to land, and Winthrop's aim for a colony to be a city upon a hill. We have recorded phrases like the New Netherland note that Manhattan was purchased of the Indians for goods valued at 60 guilders, and we see charter words saying rulers expected colonies to erect and establish a colony and plantation. These words help us understand how people thought then. But they are not the whole story. The early colonies brought both cooperation and conflict. They brought trade and farming, laws and schools, new towns and hard winters. They also began patterns of displacement and systems that would harm many people. To learn from this history, we remember these early years honestly, honouring the work and hopes of those who started new lives, and also noting the hard consequences that followed. The story of the first permanent English colonies is the start of a long history, a story of people trying, failing, learning, and changing a land and the people in it.